Hello and welcome back to Crushing Comics, the show where I fall in love with my comic book collection all over again. Let's go straight to the wall and take out a comic, shall we? I've been thinking a little bit today about the idea of beginner's mind, which is a concept that we see in a lot of like TV shows and movies where they say, you know, it's kind of like how Yoda talks to Luke a little bit. This idea of like, let everything go, try to be at ease and just go with the blankest mind that you can, right? And I was thinking that this is a trope that we know well and receive well in fiction, but that we have a lot of trouble with sometimes in real life. I don't know about you, but I have a really hard time letting go of that. Like, the first time I play a new video game, I was the kid who like always extensively read every shred of directions, and now that you just like get games on Steam or whatever, I start playing a game and I'm like, this is dumb, the controls don't make any sense, this could be better. And then, you know, after I stick around for a little while, I decide like, oh, actually maybe that was all just me and this game is fine. And, you know, it's the same with you get a new appliance, you get a new thing. I'm the kind of person who tends to go to negativity when I first get a thing. And I sometimes think, oh, that's just because I'm so critical as a person, because I'm pretty critical. But I don't think it's that. I think it's actually that I don't keep a beginner's mind, like I don't get to that blankness place, and I start with like all these preconditions and expectations about something and how it's supposed to be, and then I don't get to have like that pure beginner experience. And of course I'm thinking of that because we've moved to a whole new country and you like need a beginner's mind when you're in a new country. And I'm the kind of person in the past, like when I would change jobs or roles, I'd say, well, back in my old department, well, back in my old job, and that's not a beginner's mind, and it actually like restricts you from absorbing the new things. And so I've been really trying not to do that here in New Zealand. I've been really trying not to say in the States, and if I say it, I try to frame it like, I'm used to this thing being like XYZ in the States. Please help me understand how it's different here. But I think that also applies to comic books too. Like sometimes we have such a chip in our shoulder when we get to a new series or read more comics of an old series that we really love, that it's hard for us to just appreciate it the way we would have with like the awestruck youth of a 9-year-old. And I think part of the challenge of comics being released today is they're not being released to awestrike a 9-year-old anymore. What do we have here? Ooh, okay. You've heard me talk about these because I have opened up later books. This is Buffy The Vampire Slayer Season 8, Library Editions, Volumes 3 and 4. So, what can I talk about here and not spoil what I want to talk about when I open Volumes 1 or 2? That's the danger of this pulling things off the wall. So I think I'll talk a little bit more about the status quo of this series of 1 and 2 and talk a little bit more of the scope of it here. So, you know, Joss Whedon always had a very specific plan where he wanted to take some of Buffy's narrative and characters, and then in other ways it was more loose and things revealed itself as they went. But one restriction he had is he was on a TV budget, and the TV budget of a minor network and the TV budget of a minor network close to 20 years ago, depending on what season of the show we're talking about now. And that's not the same as watching like The Flash or Supergirl on the CW today, because effects have come a lot longer and a lot farther, and you can get a lot farther with a little bit of money now. And those shows are proven moneymakers in a different way than Buffy, because they have streaming rights and licensing that Buffy didn't really have at that time. So Whedon was somewhat constrained by how far his budget could push it. And if you watch that last few episodes, particularly the finale of Season 7, you see Whedon go as far as he possibly could go, right? Like, where I remember even at the time watching the finale of Season 7 and being like, this is pretty insane for TV. There's like scores of vampires swarming all over this massive underground cabin. It was impressive. And I say all that because Buffy Season 8 was the chance for Whedon to really let loose with that. And like one of the big factors that he plays with is Dawn, who had kind of become a little bit useless as a character in the end of Buffy there. He has Dawn be a giant. And the reason she's giant is they say it's because she lost her virginity to some kind of like what was it, like a fairy or a satyr or something. And so she's now got this curse of gigantism on her. And that's something that they probably couldn't have done well on the TV show at that time, to have her be many, many times the size of all the other characters characters and to interact with them meaningfully all the time, holding them in her hand and talking to them. And also some other things like Buffy just really being able to fly around. Flying was not something that was quite so easily done on TV at that point. There was like Smallville and Lois and Clark, but they always would like cheat the flying as much as they could so that you didn't really have somebody just zooming around. It wasn't, even at the beginning of Heroes in the early 2000s, that was an effect that was really widely used. So Buffy, you know, was constrained by the limits of the medium and the budget of the medium at the time. And so Joss Whedon, I'm sure, could argue, hey, we were doing what I've always wanted to do with Buffy, which is really go wild and be fantastical. But, you know, part of what made Buffy so special to a generation of TV watchers was that it was so grounded and it was so close to the high school and college experience, and that the only thing that really was outside of the experience were the vampires, were the creatures, and not so much this huge fantastical world. And that is where these books slightly go astray. The world just feels so big and fantastical, and Buffy's like fighting against whole militaries, and she's got this secret castle base, that it just feels a little outlandish, and in turn, not quite so much like Buffy. So that's one thing to know about them. The other thing is these books, they're actually very gorgeous, and they have these outside dust jackets, which the Hellboy Library editions don't. Pity, because they attract a lot of dust. But you can see the difference between the outer covers of the books, which look a lot like this, all the covers of the issues. And if you saw this, you'd be like, oh, hell yeah, I'm going to buy that Buffy comic book because it is going to look fantastic and just like a TV show. But this artwork is much more like the interiors. It's not bad. It's actually quite good, and the resemblance is strong. Here's a page that has a lot of the primary cast on it. We've got Buffy, we've got a depiction of the Master, we've got Willow, Spike, a lot of Xander's in there somewhere. So a lot of the primary cast, and they look good, but it's not this beautiful high-gloss photorealistic version. So, as I've mentioned in the past, Angel at this time had been at a different publisher, IDW, and Buffy didn't have him in the fold, but by the end of this series he comes into the fold. And it's a little bit of a shock how he winds up getting integrated. I won't spoil it for you other than to say you do see him by the end. And it doesn't feel totally organic, not only to what happened in Angel's series, but to what happened in the IDW books. And you know what? That's something else that we never had to deal with in the TV show, which was like having to reconcile, because there were two shows on the same network, and he was, you know, in touch with both of them, and here was a time that one of his characters kind of got away from him. So this is the internal argument we're going to have whenever we're covering runs of things and long versions of things is, you know, is it better to have this one purity of intent from a creator? Would Whedon have done this thing with Angel if he really had a season 8 of the television show, effects aside, or would he have not? Would he have been doing something different because he would have been paying closer attention to what was going on with Angel? So I can't really answer that question for you. I will say, you know, as somebody who loves Buffy and grew up, I was the same age as Buffy, I was in the same year of high school that she was, this was really a satisfying universe to go back to and read, but you can't get back to that age, right? It kind of goes with beginner's mind a little bit. Like, I was watching Buffy as somebody encountering all the same problems as her at the same time of her, at the time I was originally watching it. And I didn't start reading these until probably 2011 or 12, and I was at that point, you know, like a decade older. So, and it's hard to recapture that magic. It's an extension of the series, but it's not quite the same, and because the platform is so much more bigger and so much more magical, it's not the same as reading a series about somebody who had just left college to go to the real world, which is kind of where Buffy and the crew would have been in the television show. The end of the season 7 was kind of like a graduation in a lot of ways, in the same way the end of season 3 was. So clearly something I love a lot, and I'll talk a little bit about the status quo when we get to the first two. Should you buy these? If you're the kind of person who has all 7 seasons of Buffy on DVD, then get these, right? This should be the next thing on your DVD shelf. If you're the kind of person who's like seen a lot of Buffy, watched it on streaming, I think you could just pick these up digitally. I'm sure that they're probably actually available on Comixology and pretty deep sale at points. This is pretty old now. I think almost, gosh, it's got to be almost a decade since this first came out. And, you know, I don't think you necessarily have to have these big books. They also are available in original release trade paperbacks, and maybe they're even doing them now in some bigger collected paperbacks, which Dark Horse calls omnibuses, so be on the lookout for that. But I will say these are lovely. Note they have little ribbons to mark your pages, and they're just like sturdy, nice, well-made books. So now for the official shelving of Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 8 Volumes 3 and 4. And I might just have enough room here. If I slide over Sandman, I don't know how we're going to get it back out, but that's a problem for later. Okay, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Crushing Comics, where I talked about something that actually betrays my crush on television a little bit too. Please tune in next time for more unwrapping and more falling in love. Until then, thanks so much for watching.